We're with UC Riverside men's tennis head coach York Strother here to discuss the 2010 season. Now, Coach, before we get to the 2010 season, what were your thoughts at the conclusion of 2009 with regards to the team's play and outlook for the future?
Based on how we played at the conference tournament, I didn't think much of it at all. I mean, we finished last place in the conference tournament, and there's no way you can camouflage that. We had a few players that played actually quite well in the tournament, and then we had some people that were basically writing out the year, it would have looked like. And that was symptomatic of what we've been dealing with all year long, which was inconsistency as a team. And so I wasn't impressed with it at all. I shoved it into the back closet and moved on, and in reality I cannot use that as an indicator for the future. I mean, we had to make some adjustments and move forward, and that's what we did.
Okay. You have 6 players returning from last year's team, but no seniors.
Right.
Who do you see stepping into the leadership role?
That's a good question, actually, because that was one of the problems we had last year, was lack of leadership. We had a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and while there were some well-intending people, they just didn't know how to be a leader. And I think part of that problem was my fault because I did not mentor them in that. But based on what we've seen so far in the fall, some really good candidates would be Sean Peterson, who the team voted as our captain and has done a very good job of leading in the right direction so far. Another good candidate for leadership would be Kwok Doan. He did not have a good year last year for him, but he came back much more determined, much more focused. Just watching him, there's more purpose with him now. And then Felix Machida is last year's #1 player. Same thing, a little more focused. Now he's been dealing with some injuries and stuff, so we haven't seen him on the court a lot. But those would be the 3 leadership candidates that we have.
Okay. How did the players do in the fall tournaments, and who do you think has made the most improvement from the fall until now?
There's not a whole lot of data to go on for the fall, because one of the adjustments that we had made from last year to this year was a merit-oriented system, so that just being on the team did not necessarily mean that you get to compete. And so the team had to qualify to go to events. And in the fall, there were 3 events. Sean Peterson was the only one that qualified to go to all 3, and he competed in 2. And he actually did quite well for himself. He executed the things that we were working on. He competed quite well against some people that actually had more firepower than him, and so I was pleased with that. Also, in the 3rd event, Kwok Doan qualified, and he actually beat some really good players, so I was very pleased with that. It would have been nice if he'd have qualified for some other events too. So I was pleased with him. He's probably came out of the fall the most impressive of everybody. And then in the last event, the doubles team of Austin Andres and John Park defeated a team from the University of San Diego that on paper nobody would have thought. So that kind of raised an eyebrow, and now we're looking at them more seriously as a possible doubles candidate. But like I said, we didn't have a whole lot of data.
Okay. Speaking of Austin, your freshman class last year was pretty successful. Felix earned Big West All-Conference honors playing at the #1 spot, and Austin had won the most singles matches on the team. How much did they improve from last year, and what are your expectations for this season for them?
Well, comparing from last year to this year, again, remains to be seen because of not a whole lot of data in the fall, which is disappointing. Having said that, Austin came back with a different attitude too. We're not suffering from, if you want to call suffering an issue, but we're not challenged by lack of tennis capability. We have players that can play. The issue is getting them to do it every day. The issue is getting them to do the things, the little teeny detail-oriented things that successful people do, and less successful people thinks just clutters their day. And Austin is starting to understand that. Felix is starting to understand that. And so it'll remain to be seen how they use that information, because it's one thing to learn it, but if you can't apply it, it's useless. And so all I have to go on right now on that would be, we just went to the closest thing to a scrimmage the NCAA would allow us, and Austin went undefeated. He played 3 sets and he won all 3, and he came back with some verbal feedback that showed that he had understood what we had been working on and he could see the applications of it. Felix, even though he didn't get to play, went with us, and he noticed when people were executing the stuff we've been working on and when they weren't, and the results, and so he was kind of learning vicariously. So I'm expecting a lot from them. It's going to be up to them to absorb and apply the systems that we're working on.
Okay. Who would you highlight as other key returnees from last year?
Interestingly enough, all of them. And the reason I say that is because we have a team of 9, and it takes 6 to start a lineup, and each person on the team is important. Now, they may have different roles. I mean, an example would be John Park. Of anybody on the team, John Park has the game to be successful at the Division I level. I mean, case in point, he went undefeated at that scrimmage we played at this past weekend, going 4-0 and playing some very, very good tennis. Felix Machadez has the experience of having played number 1. And so now he knows what to expect, and he can pass on what he's learned. I mean, because in his last 10 matches last year, he did split, going 5-5. So while most of the year was kind of hard on him, at the end he had started to figure it out and was getting some positive results. Improvement from last year to this year, Quoc Dong has made a massive jump. I mean, last year he was playing like 4-5, and right now he'd be 1 or 2 on the team, possibly 1. From a leadership standpoint, Sean Peterson becomes really important because he's absolutely on the same page with the coaching staff. He understands what we want, and he lives that philosophy every day. And so he is our liaison between the players, and he can keep the kids honest. From a reliability, day in, day out type of performance, it'd be Austin Andres. I mean, Austin's game does not go to these real high peaks, but it doesn't go to real low lows either. So day in, day out, we can rely on him. And the wild card in all this, and I don't know that I'd ever want to be called a wild card, but the wild card is Michael Conroy, because while he's one of the most inconsistent performers that we have, excuse me, he has some of the most tools. And so once he starts absorbing and accepting and using the things that we're working on, I mean, he could be very successful at number 6, or he could be moved way up in the ladder. But again, that's hard to tell because we're talking about things that haven't happened yet. So, like I said, there's a lot of people there that each bring something to the table. And if any one of those components aren't there, we're going to struggle.